Sometimes what tries to end you isn't the thing doctors are trained to find. 20 specialists had circled the billionaire's bed and still had no answer. Machines blinked. Pumps hummed. The man in the silk robe grew weaker hour by hour. And then the person nobody noticed, the woman with the mop, stepped in and smelled something that did not belong. Her name was Ruth Miller, 41, night shift housekeeper at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. She paused at the door of Suite 19, the VIP room worth more than most homes, and took a slow breath. Antiseptic, cologne, and a thin, sharp scent like old coins rubbed between fingers. Her eyes slipped to the man in the bed, Ethan Caldwell, 58, a billionaire tech investor whose face was well known on news shows. He was pale, sweating, and losing hair in small, uneven clumps to the pillow. The nurses whispered. The doctors argued gently. And Ruth's heart kicked hard because her mind, trained years ago in community college chemistry, caught a pattern the others had not said out loud. The nails, thin pale stripes near the tips. The gums, strange and dusky. The breath, faint, metallic. It slid into place like a puzzle piece. Not a rare virus, not a mystery bug. Poison. Before we go deeper, quick check-in for the viewers. If you love gripping true-feeling stories with twists, hit the like button and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Lagos? Houston? London? Drop your city, I'm reading them. Now back to the moment. Ruth at the door, the night humming, a quiet beep-beep pulling her toward a choice. Speak up and risk being laughed at, or stay silent and watch a man fade because no one wanted to hear the cleaner. Hours earlier, the day shift had been chaos dressed in white coats. Dr. Noah Grant, the lead internist, had brought in everyone, cardio, neuro, tox, infectious disease. They scanned Ethan's head, chest, belly. They took blood again and again. They whispered about autoimmune storms, about rare bacteria, about a drug reaction. But Ethan kept slipping. Numb fingers, weak legs, burning stomach, a strange tremor in his jaw that made the nurse page keep a hand near his call button. Late afternoon, they set up a portable filter to clean his blood while his wife, Lena, in a pearl sweater and red eyes, signed consent papers with a shaking hand. Reporters waited at the back entrance. A private security guy stood in the hall with a buzz cut and a stare like a locked door. Everyone looked important. Everyone looked busy. But being busy is not the same as being right. Ruth had watched this all with the quiet skill that makes a cleaner invisible. Her cart squeaked once. She oiled the wheel so it wouldn't squeak again. Her shoes didn't click because she had learned which spots on the floor were softer. She kept her head down when the surgeon with the perfect hair swept past, and she stepped aside when the lab runner rushed by with another tube of blood. But inside her mind the old classroom turned on like lights after a storm. Chemistry I, Chemistry II, Toxicology elective. She took those before life took other things. She had once aimed for a lab tech job, but when her dad got sick, she dropped out and worked. Then years slid by. Bills grew. Her dad passed. She stayed with jobs that paid now, not later. She never stopped reading though. At night on the bus she opened her cracked phone and read about molecules, kitchen acids, metals that hide in plain sight. She told nobody. People didn't ask the cleaner what she studied. The first time she saw Ethan, he was still walking. He had arrived 2 weeks ago with a fever and numb toes, angry at being sick and polite at the same time. He joked with the nurse, tipped the valet, and took a video call with his partner Cole Avery about a deal he refused to delay. Then came the cramps. Then the vomiting. Then the weak knees. His hair began to shed in threads on the pillow. The doctors frowned deeper. They asked about travel. He had flown to Austin, San Diego, and Miami last month. They asked about foods. He ate clean, oatmeal, salmon, salads. They asked about hobbies. He golfed and collected watches. They asked about medication. He took vitamins from a fancy brand and a heart pill at night. They asked about enemies. He smiled thinly and said, "People dislike money, not me." But Ruth had seen the way his wife gripped her purse when Cole walked in, and the way Cole's eyes lingered on the monitors, not the patient. She had also seen the way the new personal chef dropped off glass containers labeled bone broth, C, and green power, E to the private fridge in Suite 19. It was not her place to ask what was inside. Yet she noticed what most people miss. The smell when the fridge door swung open, a tiny note of metal that did not belong to kale or ginger. That night, just before midnight, Ruth rolled her cart to the doorway. The hall was quiet. A resident sat at the station, head bowed over charts. The security guy had left to get coffee. Inside, Ethan slept in a shallow, twitchy way. The monitor drew green mountains that shook every few beats. On the side table sat 2 things from home: a brushed steel thermos cup with a black lid, and a small brown bottle of Immune Boost drops with a glass pipette. Ruth had wiped that table every night. She knew the weight of that cup. Tonight it looked heavier. She set her mop against the wall and moved closer to the door. She didn't step in yet. She just looked. The thermos had a faint ring under it like something had spilled and been wiped in a hurry. The bottle had a tiny crystal on its rim like dried sugar, but this wasn't sugar. Ruth's scalp tingled. Old lesson. Some poisons leave white crystals as they dry. Old memory. You can't smell arsenic well, but you can smell garlic on a poisoned breath, and you can see pale bands on fingernails after repeated exposure. Another memory. Thallium causes hair loss and nerve pain. She watched a single hair drift from Ethan's temple to the sheet. Which one was it? Arsenic? Thallium? Why not both? No, keep it simple. Look for the clue right in front of you. She glanced at Ethan's hands. The nails showed thin, light lines like chalk ghosts. Her breath caught. It matched the picture in her old textbook. She stepped inside. Just wiping the tray, she whispered, half to him, half to herself. She lifted a corner of the food tray with a gloved hand. Under it, hidden from a quick glance, was a folded napkin with a stain yellow-brown, sticky at the edges. Not soup. Not tea. Something else. She lifted the napkin and found a tiny packet, torn open, no brand. The kind of packet used for natural sweetener at trendy cafes. No logo. Just white paper. Inside, a trace of fine powder like dust on a window ledge. Her stomach lurched. She thought of her dad teaching her to spot the one nail in a carpet with the head just a shade different. Ruth, the trick is to notice the thing that doesn't belong. This didn't belong. The door clicked. She slid the napkin back fast. Lena entered, eyes red, hair pulled back in a rough bun. I forgot my phone, she said. Her voice was soft and dangerous, the kind that shakes later but not now. Ruth stepped back, hands down, face calm. Yes, ma'am, she said and pointed at the charger by the window. Lena grabbed her phone, looked at her husband, then at the thermos. Her fingers hovered like she might take it home. Then she left it. He liked tea tonight, she told the air and walked out. Ruth watched her go and tried to stop her mind from running to places it shouldn't. A wife was a wife. Grief makes people odd around cups and things that feel like control. Ruth went to the sink and turned on the water to cover the faint tremble in her hands. She spoke low, the way you do to calm a scared cat. Okay, Ruth, think. You can't do a lab test. You can't order a scan. What can you do? She remembered a trick from an article. A copper coin can turn dark with some arsenic compounds in a warm mix, and garlic smell can be stronger with steam. She did not have a copper coin, but she did have a good nose and a brain. She dried her hands, rolled her cart closer, and lifted the thermos lid a crack. A small puff of warm air kissed her face. Yes, ginger, maybe. But under it a faint metal bite like the taste of a penny on your tongue. She closed the lid and felt a cold road open inside her. Somebody had added something they shouldn't to a drink that kept being sipped by a man everyone thought was safe in a hospital. She needed to tell a nurse. But it was midnight, and the luck of night shift is that people listen less. Still, do it. She slid out to the hall where Nurse Page scribbled notes. Ma'am, Ruth said softly, may I ask something odd? Page looked up, tired but kind. What's up? Ruth swallowed. I think Mr. Caldwell's drink might be the problem. The words sounded thin, almost silly, hanging in the bright hall. Page blinked, then frowned. His drink? Yes, Ruth said. He keeps a thermos. There's a smell. And his nails. And his breath has a garlic-like note. I used to study chemistry and Page lifted a hand. Not rude, just done. Ruth, I appreciate you, she said. But this is a very complex case. If the team thought it was toxic exposure, they'd be on it. What if they're on the wrong toxic thing? Ruth asked. Page sighed. I'll flag it, she said, the way people say they will and sometimes do, sometimes don't. She turned back to her chart. Ruth stood in the quiet a second longer, then nodded. Thank you, she whispered and rolled her card away. She did not see Cole Avery step out of the shadow near the elevator, his eyes on Suite 19 like a hawk's. Inside the room, Ethan stirred. His eyelids fluttered. A soft gasp broke from his throat and he pressed a hand to his belly. Ruth moved back inside with a clean cloth and a cup of ice chips because no one refuses the person offering comfort. Small ice, she asked. He nodded barely. She placed an ice chip on his tongue. His fingers trembled. Up close, the breath hit her again, metal under mint. She watched the monitor, a long plateau, then a small fall. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere on the city street. The sky beyond the window looked like dark steel. Ruth set the cup down and leaned slightly over the bed as if straightening the sheet, but really to see his nails again. The faint pale bands were there. She smelled his hair, clean but thinning. She looked at the four-pole. A fresh bag hung labeled clear. The line ran smooth. No sediment. The world pretended to be normal while something quiet and cold worked its way through his body. The door opened again and Dr. Noah Grant entered with Dr. Priya Desai from toxicology. Paige must have told someone after all. "Mr. Caldwell," Dr. Grant said, voice steady, "we're going to adjust your fluids and send another lab." He glanced at Ruth as if seeing her for the first time. "Could we get a little space?" Ruth stepped back to the door but not out. She watched as Dr. Desai checked reflexes and touched the skin on Ethan's forearm. "Any tingling?" she asked. He tried to say yes. It sounded like a soft cough. Dr. Desai looked at the monitor, then at the tray, then at the thermos. "What's this?" she asked. Paige said. "From home." Dr. Desai's face didn't change, but the air around her did. "Who made it?" "Private chef," Paige said. "And his wife." Dr. Desai lifted the lid, smelled it, then sealed it. "Send this to the lab," she told Paige. "Chain of custody bag. Now." Paige moved fast. Dr. Grant raised his brows. "You think?" "We check," Dr. Desai said. Her eyes slid to Ruth for 1 second, and Ruth felt something like a wire pulled tight between them. "Did you see it too?" Ruth lowered her gaze and nodded once, almost nothing. They drew more blood. They bagged the thermos and the bottle of drops. They wrote down times. They made the room look like nothing had happened. But something had. A door had opened in the case. Poison was now on the table. Ruth stood by the wall, hands clasped, heart pounding so hard she felt it in her fingers. She wanted to sit. She did not. She wanted to cry. She did not. She wanted to tell someone that you should also check the sweetener packets because rich people like natural things that are not always safe. She kept quiet because the doctors were moving now, and she had learned that moving doctors don't like voices from the edges. At 1:07 a.m. the lab called back, not with a full panel that takes time, but with a flag. Heavy metal screen suggestive, not conclusive. Dr. Desai pressed her lips together and ordered a specific test for arsenic and thallium. She also ordered a chelating agent to stand by. "We'll wait for confirmation," Dr. Grant said. "We don't have time to wait," Dr. Desai answered, low but firm. "He is slipping." She looked to Paige. "Where is the family?" "Wife went home," Paige said. "Partner is in the lounge." "Bring him," Dr. Desai said. "And call security to log personal items." The room felt smaller after that. Ruth took her cart and backed into the hall to give them space. She should go mop the stair landing. She should clean the vending nook. She should do her job. But her feet did not move. She stood by the glass and looked through at the man who had everything and now might lose it all to a thing you can't see. She thought of his wife's hand hovering near the thermos. She thought of the quiet chef labeling jars with neat sharp letters. She thought of Cole Avery leaning too close to the bed screen when Ethan slept. She thought of the unmarked packet under the tray. Her skin prickled. A clear picture formed. If you wanted someone to sip the thing that sickens them slowly so no one blames you, you would hide it in the one item people never question from home: tea sweetened with a natural powder that is not natural at all. The elevator chimed. Cole stepped out, suit crisp, smile wrong. He walked like the floor owed him a favor. "How is he?" he asked, already moving past, already reaching for the door. Paige met him with a palm up. "We're running tests," she said. "We need you to wait a moment." Cole's eyes flicked to the sealed bag with the thermos inside. "What's that for?" he asked lightly. "Evidence," Dr. Desai said, appearing like a shadow you suddenly notice. "Standard." "Of what?" "Of care," she said. "Please have a seat." Cole's jaw tightened once, then he smiled again, the smile that never reached his eyes. "Of course," he said and sat. Ruth watched him watch the bag. She looked at his hands. Clean. No shakes. No sweat. Too calm. At 1:19 a.m. Ethan's monitor alarm chirped. His breathing grew shallow, face turning the color of old paper. "Mr. Caldwell, stay with me," Paige said, voice firm. Dr. Grant called out orders. Dr. Desai snapped for the chelating agent. The room filled with purpose like a dam breaking. Ruth took one step forward without thinking, ready to hold a wrist, wipe a brow, do the small human thing that matters when big things fail. "Ruth, outside please," Paige said, not unkindly. Ruth nodded and moved back, but she kept the glass in view. She pressed her hand to the cool pane and whispered, "Don't let go." A quiet shape slipped up beside her. The private chef, Mason Lee, face pale, hands twitching. "Is he?" Mason asked. His eyes bounced from the bed to the bag with the thermos and back. Ruth turned her head. "What did you make for him today?" she asked softly. He swallowed. "Bone broth, green juice, ginger tea." "With what sweetener?" He blinked. "He liked the natural packets his friend brought," he said. "Which friend?" Mason looked confused. "Mr. Avery," he said. "He said sugar was bad for stress." Something low and cold moved through Ruth's chest like fog off the harbor. She felt the napkin's weight again, though it wasn't in her hand. Alarms rose inside the room. A code was not called, but it was close. Dr. Desai hung the chelating bag and spoke quick to Dr. Grant. Paige pushed meds through the line. Ethan's chest moved in small, stubborn lifts. The green mountains on the screen shook and steadied. Readings inched in the right direction. The room's panic softened a hair. Ruth exhaled, hand flat to the glass. She didn't know if they were right yet. She only knew they were finally facing the thing she had smelled the moment she opened the door. Then, just as the room's edges loosened, another small thing happened, the kind that means everything. Lena came back. She moved fast, sweater mismatched, hair wild, eyes bright with fear. She rushed to the door, saw the sealed bag with the thermos, and froze like she'd stepped on glass. Her gaze shot to Cole in the chair. His mouth softened into a picture of kindness that felt painted on. "They're testing your tea," he said gently. Something in Lena's face flickered, shock first, then something like shame, then anger aimed who knows where. She reached for the bag as if to hug it to her chest. Paige stopped her. "We need to keep that sealed," Paige said. Lena lifted her hands. "Of course," she whispered. But her eyes filled, and she bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to leave a dent. Ruth stood between them all. Doctors, wife, partner, chef, and felt the story push toward a cliff. If the lab confirmed arsenic or thallium, everything would change. The team would start full treatment. Security would lock the floor. Someone would be questioned under lights too bright. But the lab wasn't back yet. And now Ruth's mind, which had saved a man by opening a door, saw another door open. Who put the packet there? The chef said Cole brought them. The wife hovered near the cup. The partner watched the monitor more than the man. The man himself had 1,000 people who wished him broke, not dead. But sometimes those close to you strike the match because they know where you keep the gasoline. Inside, Ethan coughed and tried to speak. His lips formed a word. Ruth couldn't hear it through the glass. Paige leaned close. "What?" Ethan's lips moved again, slower. "Key." Paige frowned. "What key?" He moved his fingers like turning. Then his hand fell. The monitor steadied. He was not better. He was not gone. He was between. Ruth pressed her forehead to the glass for 1 second, the way a mother does to a nursery window. Then she straightened because the chef at her elbow was shaking, the wife was crying, and the partner was smiling the wrong smile. Down the hall, a phone rang at the nurse's station. A tech answered, listened, then stood. "Results?" she called, voice tight. Dr. Desai stepped into the hall. The tech handed over the paper. The toxicologist read, breathed out, and lifted her head. Her eyes found Dr. Grant. "It's there," she said, voice low but carrying. "It's in the sample." Paige closed her eyes for a second, relief and fear at once. Cole's smile broke, then came back stronger, like a man putting on a fresh mask. Lena made a small sound that was not a word. Mason sagged against the wall. Ruth felt the world tilt like a boat turning in rough water. Dr. Desai turned back toward the room, toward the man on the bed, toward the bag on the pole with the medicine that could pull heavy metals from blood like a magnet from sand. The next steps would be fast and loud and full of orders. Ruth looked at the unmarked packet under the tray in her memory and made a decision. She could not test anything. She could not arrest anyone. But she could tell the one truth she owned, that she had seen another packet torn, hidden, and that the smell had been wrong for days, and that someone kept bringing drinks after the nurses told them to stop. She would say it and be brave if they sneered. She would say it because a man was lying in a bed he might never leave if the truth stayed quiet. She turned to step into the room to speak to Dr. Desai while the team moved, to give the final piece that locked the puzzle, when the overhead speaker clicked and a calm voice rang out over the floor. "Security to Suite 19. Security to Suite 19. The hall tensed. 2 guards ran. Cole stood at once. Lena grabbed her purse with both hands like a life ring. The chef whispered, "I didn't," and choked on the rest. Ruth put her palm on the door. The lock light turned red from green. Someone inside had pressed the privacy lock. Through the glass, she saw Dr. Grant's head snap toward the door, confused. She saw Dr. Desai's mouth shape a hard question. She saw a shadow move near the 4-pole, not the nurse's shadow, not the doctor's. Someone who should not be that close to the line. Ruth's heart slammed. She lifted her fist to bang the glass and shout, but the lock clicked again, and the door eased open 2 inches, just enough for a voice to slide through, and the voice that came was smooth and careful and much too calm. "Everything is under control," it said. And the last thing Ruth saw before the door shut again was a hand, steady, practiced, reaching for the clamp on the 4 line. The light above the door glowed red. Lock. Ruth Miller's fist hovered against the glass, knuckles white, her chest tight. She wanted to scream, but she knew screaming in a hospital made people hear you as crazy before they heard the truth. Inside, she saw the shadow again, steady, careful fingers reaching toward the 4 clamp like someone who had done this before. Not a panicked wife. Not a tired doctor. Not a nurse under pressure. This was control. Deliberate. "Open it," Ruth hissed. Her voice cracked the quiet hallway, making the guards skid to a stop. One guard swiped his badge, the other hit the manual override. The lock stayed red. Inside, Paige spun toward the door, mouthing, "It won't open." Dr. Desai's voice cut sharp. "Step back." Who touched that line? The glass blocked the words, but Ruth could read lips well enough. The room was chaos contained. Ethan Caldwell's body jerked once on the bed, his face gray, lips blue at the edges. His wife, Lena, clutched her purse like it was a lifeline. Cole Avery, smooth as ever, stayed in his chair, palms out like he was the calmest man alive. But Ruth's eyes never left the 4-pole. She knew she had seen another figure near it before the lock. The chef, Mason Lee, stood frozen at the foot of the bed now, mouth half open, sweat dripping down his collar. His eyes kept darting to the sealed thermos on the table as if it was about to scream. The lock light flickered. Green. The guards shoved the door open, barreling inside. "Step away," one barked. Their hands were already near their belts. The shadow, whoever had touched the clamp, was gone, blended back into the circle of family and staff. Dr. Desai seized the 4-line, inspected the port, then barked, "Flush this now." Paige scrambled, yanking a new syringe from her tray. She pushed saline through with practiced speed. Dr. Grant leaned over Ethan, pressing 2 fingers to his neck, eyes flicking between the monitor and the man's chest. Ethan's lips parted again. This time the whisper scraped past the glass. Ruth heard it, faint but clear. One word. "Key." Her mind spun. What key? A safe key? A car key? Or was it code, something hidden in the poisoning itself? The monitor shrieked. Beep beep beep. Flatline for 2 seconds that stretched like forever. Paige started compressions, hands steady. The guards moved to push Ruth back into the hall. But she planted her feet, eyes locked on the brown bottle of Immune Boost, still sitting half forgotten on the side table. Its pipette gleamed under the light. A single drop clung to the glass, thick, almost syrupy. She knew without knowing, this wasn't vitamins. This was the killer. "Check the drops." Ruth shouted, voice raw. "The bottle, check it now." Heads whipped toward her. For a breath, silence. Then Dr. Desai's eyes narrowed. She grabbed the bottle, held it to the light, unscrewed the pipette. She sniffed. Her brows snapped together. "Get this to the lab, priority 1. Chain of custody," she ordered. And in that moment, Ruth saw it again. Cole Avery's mask slipped just for a heartbeat. His jaw tightened, his hand curled, then relaxed as he smoothed his tie. He leaned back, crossed one leg, and gave a smile that didn't touch his eyes. The chelating drug began dripping into Ethan's line. His monitor blinked, beeped, stuttered, and then caught a rhythm again. Not strong, not safe, but present. His chest rose in shallow, stubborn breaths. Lena collapsed into a chair, clutching her purse with shaking fingers. Mason Lee pressed his back to the wall, muttering, "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Ruth stood in the doorway, chest heaving, mop forgotten against the wall. For a flicker of time, the billionaire's life balanced between metal and medicine, between poison and antidote. And only she knew the truth that no one else had seen. The pattern on his nails, the smell on his breath, the packet under the tray. But as she watched Cole's smile settle back into place, a deeper fear curled in her stomach. Saving Ethan might only be the beginning. Because the real question wasn't just what was killing him. It was who put it there, and how far would they go to keep the secret buried. The overhead speaker chimed again. Code blue, suite 19. The monitor spiked, Ethan's body jolted, and every eye in the room turned to the man gasping on the bed. And Ruth realized, this wasn't over. It was only getting darker. The hallway outside suite 19 felt colder than the night air beyond the hospital walls. Ruth Miller's hands trembled as she gripped her mop handle like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The overhead speaker had just echoed through the floor. Code Blue Suite 19. Everyone knew what that meant. A man with billions, a man guarded by specialists and glass walls, was fighting death one heartbeat at a time. Inside the room, chaos took a shape. Dr. Priya Desai was calling out orders like a conductor leading an orchestra in a storm. Push one more amp. Keep compression steady, don't stop until I say. Paige, the nurse, was bent over the bed, her arms driving rhythm into the billionaire's chest. Dr. Noah Grant stood at the head, fitting an airway tube, his voice taut but calm. We're in. Bag him. Keep oxygen at 100. The machine beeped in a stutter. Then silence. Then one weak blip. Ruth leaned against the glass, heart in her throat. She wasn't supposed to be here. Cleaners weren't part of codes. But she couldn't move. Not when she had seen the bottle, the thermos, the powder packet. Not when she knew someone was still in this hospital who didn't want Ethan Caldwell to leave alive. And then she saw him. Cole Avery. He hadn't flinched when the alarm screamed. He hadn't rushed to his partner's bedside like Lena did, wailing, "Don't leave me." Cole stayed seated, one ankle over his knee, hands clasped, eyes fixed not on the man in the bed but on the bag of chelating drug dripping into the 4-line. His lips curled just enough for Ruth to catch it through the glass, a smile as faint and sharp as a knife's edge. Her stomach dropped. Cole wanted this. Cole was watching the medicine as though it were his enemy, not the poison that had been eating Ethan alive. The door burst wider as more staff rushed in. A crash cart rolled beside the bed. Pads pressed to Ethan's chest. His body jumped once hard. The monitor beeped, flat, then stuttered into rhythm again. Weak but present. Got him. Paige cried, sweat dripping down her brow. Relief rippled across the room. But it wasn't victory. It was survival for one more moment. Dr. Desai barked, "Get me toxicology confirmation, full spectrum. And call security. No more outside food, no home supplements. Nothing enters this room without clearance. Do you understand?" The guards nodded. One stepped into the hall and blocked Ruth's view. She pressed against the wall, heart hammering. Should she tell them about the packet she had seen under the tray? Should she shout it now before it vanished in the shuffle? Her mouth opened, then closed. Because Lena, the wife, had just pulled her chair closer to the bed, gripping Ethan's limp hand. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were sharp, almost calculating, flicking from the 4 to the doctors to Cole across the room. Ruth swallowed hard. What if it wasn't just one of them? What if the wife and the partner were both tangled in this? To understand what was happening now, Ruth's mind kept flashing back to the small thing she had found. That packet. It was so ordinary that anyone else would have tossed it without a thought. A white paper wrapper, torn open, folded into a napkin. No brand, no label. Just powder. But Ruth had seen the trace of residue along its edges. She had smelled it faintly on Ethan's breath when she leaned close. She remembered her community college professor's voice. The danger of thallium is that it looks like salt and tastes like sugar. It was always the little things. And now those little things had nearly killed him. Ethan's chest rose shallowly. His skin was ashen, but the monitors held steady. The chelating medicine was doing its slow, invisible work, binding the metals in his blood and dragging them toward a path out of his body. But it wouldn't be enough. Not yet. Ruth knew heavy metals could linger, damage nerves, destroy hearts, strip life piece by piece. Saving him once didn't mean saving him for good. And as she watched Cole lean forward, his voice smooth as silk, she knew the battle outside the body might be worse than the one inside. "Doctor," Cole said, smiling toward Dr. Grant, "surely this is overreaction. Ethan's system is fragile. All these treatments, you may be hurting him more than helping." Dr. Desai's head snapped up. "Mr. Avery, your partner is alive right now because we acted. Without that, he would be dead." Cole raised both palms, the picture of calm. "I'm only saying, be careful. Sometimes doing too much is worse than doing nothing." Ruth nearly slammed her fist into the glass. Doing nothing was exactly what he wanted. She could feel it. When the room finally steadied, Ruth slipped away. Her cart rattled softly as she wheeled it down the long corridor. She stopped near the supply closet, hidden from the nurse's eyes, and pressed her forehead against the cool wall. She whispered to herself, "You saw it. Don't let them bury it. You saw the packet. You smelled the metal." Her father's voice echoed in her head. "When nobody listens, Ruthie, write it down. Paper doesn't forget like people do." So she pulled a crumpled slip from her apron pocket and began scribbling with the stub of a pencil she always carried. White packet, torn, no brand. Metallic smell and thermos. Fingernail lines equals arsenic/thallium. Wife hovered near T. Partner brought natural sweetener. Chef delivered drinks. She folded the paper twice and shoved it deep into her shoe. If anything happened, if no one listened, that note would be her proof. The night stretched long. Doctors rotated. Nurses traded shifts. Security guards planted themselves like statues at the door of Suite 19. Reporters outside grew restless, sending messages through the cracks. Is he dead? Is the billionaire gone? Inside, Ethan slept under heavy medicine. Machines hissed. Bags dripped. Ruth cleaned. That was her shield. A mop, a rag, the role nobody questioned. But as she wiped corners and changed bins, she listened. She caught the whispers in the corners of the ward. Paige whispered to another nurse, "If this was poison, someone close had to slip it in." Lena whispered into her phone when she thought no one heard, "No, I didn't tell them yet." "Stop asking. Just wait." Mason the chef whispered in the staff kitchen, voice trembling, "I don't want to be blamed. I swear I didn't know what was in the packets." And Cole didn't whisper. He laughed in the waiting lounge, too loud for 2 a.m., his voice smooth as wine. "He'll pull through. He always does. I've already called the board, we'll be ready either way." Those whispers painted a picture darker than any chart or lab result. Near dawn, when the sky outside the window softened from black to gray, Ethan stirred. His eyes cracked open. Weak, glassy, but alive. "Mr. Caldwell," Dr. Desai said gently, leaning close. "You're safe for now. You had a severe toxic exposure. We're treating it." His lips trembled. A word tried to form. "Key," he rasped again, the same word Ruth had heard before. "Key to what?" Paige asked softly. But his eyes slid closed again, too heavy to answer. The word burned in Ruth's mind. Why keep saying it? What key could matter so much when you were dying? She thought of her list. Poison. Packet. Partner. Wife. Ship. And now key. The puzzle was growing. And the clock was still ticking. She knew what she had to do. She had to speak louder. Not just to a nurse. Not just in a hallway. She had to force someone important to listen. But she also knew the danger. People with power didn't like maids who accused billionaires' wives or partners. They could crush her job, her life, her name. Still, if she stayed silent, Ethan Caldwell might not survive another night. She gripped her mop so tight her knuckles ached. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Say it. Tell them what you saw." She stepped toward Suite 19, ready to open her mouth. And then she froze. Because at that exact moment, Cole Avery slipped something from his pocket into Lena's hand. A small, folded packet. White. Unmarked. The same as the one under the tray. Lena's eyes widened. She closed her fist tight, then slid it into her purse. And when she looked up, she saw Ruth watching through the glass. Ruth's breath caught. Their eyes locked across the corridor. For the first time, Lena's grief mask cracked. Behind it burned something harder, fear, anger, and a warning, "Stay silent." Ruth's throat went dry. She turned back toward her cart, forcing her body to move, her mop squeaking faintly on the polished floor. But inside, her chest roared with the truth she couldn't unsee. The wife had the packet. The partner had given it. And the man in the bed had whispered "key," because he knew something that could expose them both. As the sun lifted outside, washing pale gold over the city, Suite 19 looked almost peaceful. Machines hummed steady. Nurses charted notes. The billionaire slept, his chest rising with fragile breaths. But Ruth knew peace was a lie, because she had just seen the next attempt slide from one set of hands to another. And if she didn't act soon, the next dose might finish what the poison had already begun. She pressed her palm to the cool glass one last time and whispered to herself, "Tonight, I tell them. Tonight, I won't be invisible." But as she wheeled her cart away, she didn't notice the quiet figure following her at a distance. Shoes silent, eyes fixed, carrying another packet in his pocket. The poison wasn't done. The morning sun crept through the tall glass panes of Johns Hopkins Hospital, streaking Suite 19 with pale light. The city outside stirred awake, horns blaring in traffic, delivery trucks grumbling, but inside, the billionaire's room was unnervingly still. Machines pulsed with steady rhythm, plastic tubes hissed gently, and the quiet beeps marked each fragile breath Ethan Caldwell took. To anyone walking past, it looked calm, like a man recovering. But Ruth Miller knew better. The calm was a mask, the way hospital mornings always wore a disguise. Beneath the hum of machines and the shuffle of nurses, danger still coiled like a snake under the bed. And she knew it because she had seen it with her own eyes. Just hours earlier, Cole Avery had slipped a packet, white, unmarked, into Lena Caldwell's hand. Ruth had seen Lena clutch it tight, hide it in her purse, then glare at her through the glass with a warning written in her eyes, "Stay silent or else." Ruth had gone back to her mop, pretending not to notice, but the truth had burned through her bones. The poison wasn't finished. Ethan stirred again, eyelids fluttering like weak wings. His voice rasped, barely audible, but Ruth had learned to read the shape of words through glass. His lips moved once more. "Key." That single word echoed in Ruth's mind. It was the third time he'd said it since collapsing. He wasn't babbling. He wasn't confused. He was pointing them toward something. But what? A key to a safe? A key to an account? A key to a secret that could explain why someone closest to him wanted him dead? She knew she couldn't solve it alone. Not anymore. Inside, the tension thickened. Lena sat at her husband's bedside, dabbing his forehead with a tissue, her face painted with grief. To any stranger, she looked like a devoted wife keeping vigil. But Ruth had seen the truth behind her mask. She had seen her hand clutch the packet. Across the room, Cole paced. He wore his suit jacket despite the hour, his tie knotted perfect, his face set in smooth control. He spoke too easily to the doctors. He asked too many questions about the medicine, his voice dripping with false concern. "Are we sure this is safe? Wouldn't it be better to let him rest naturally? Sometimes interference does more harm than good." His words weren't the pleas of a worried partner. They were distractions, tiny wedges of doubt meant to slow the doctors down. And then there was Mason Lee, the chef, sitting pale against the wall, hands folded like a child caught stealing. His eyes flicked between Lena and Cole, and his lips moved silently as if repeating a prayer. But guilt clung to him, thick and sticky. Ruth wondered, was he complicit or just afraid? Ruth mopped quietly in the corridor, her heart racing. Every nerve screamed at her to storm into the room and point at Lena's purse. To shout the truth before it was too late. But fear gnawed at her. She had no proof. No badge. No authority. Just a mop and memories of chemistry classes long abandoned. If she accused Lena or Cole and turned out wrong, she could lose everything, her job, her reputation, her safety. But if she stayed silent, Ethan might lose his life. Her father's voice echoed again. "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared, Ruthie. It means you do it while you're shaking." She closed her eyes, gripping the mop handle. Courage had to come soon. At 8:15 a.m., the quiet was broken by the sound of hard-soled shoes down the hallway. A man in a navy overcoat strode toward Suite 19, his posture military straight. He flashed a badge at the guards. Detective Raymond Cross. The hospital had finally called the police. "Morning," he said briskly, stepping past Ruth without a glance. "Detective, Major Crimes. I understand there's suspicion of poisoning?" Dr. Desai met him at the door, exhaustion in her eyes but fire in her voice. "Heavy metals confirmed in toxicology. Not dietary, not accidental. This is deliberate." Cole shifted in his seat, his calm face not breaking. Lena's hands clutched tighter around her purse. Mason looked ready to faint. Detective Cross scanned the room with sharp eyes. "Then until further notice, this is a crime scene. Nobody leaves. Nobody touches anything not cleared. Understood?" The room stiffened, and Ruth's heart leapt. Finally, someone with authority. Someone who could hear her. Detective Cross began quickly. "Mr. Caldwell's condition. Stable? Fragile?" Dr. Grant replied. "Alive but compromised." Cross nodded. He turned to Lena first. "Mrs. Caldwell, what's your role in your husband's care?" Her chin lifted, her pearl earrings catching the light. "I'm his wife. I sit with him. I bring him comfort." "Do you provide him with any food or drink?" Lena hesitated, her eyes flicking to Cole, then back. "Only tea. Herbal. He prefers it to the hospital's weak blends." "Did you prepare the tea?" She shook her head. "Mason did. Our chef." All eyes turned to Mason. His hand shook. I made the tea, yes. Ginger and lemon. But the sweetener, that wasn't mine." Cole's smooth voice cut in. "That was me. I brought natural sweeteners from a supplier. Ethan wanted healthier options. I shared them." Cross's eyes sharpened. "And where are these packets now?" Cole gestured to the table. "With his things. You're welcome to test them. I've nothing to hide." But Ruth's got twisted. He had plenty to hide. Because she had seen him hand a packet to Lena only hours earlier. A fresh one. Her palms slick with sweat, Ruth stepped forward. "Detective," she blurted, her voice breaking the quiet. Everyone turned, startled. She had never spoken in a room like this before. Cross eyed her up and down. "And you are?" "Ruth Miller. Housekeeping. Night shift." Cole's smile widened faintly. "Detective, I hardly think the janitorial staff. But Ruth's voice grew firmer. I saw something. A torn packet under his tray last night. Unmarked. I smelled something metallic in his drink. And just hours ago, her voice caught, but she forced the words out. Mr. Avery passed another packet to Mrs. Caldwell. She put it in her purse. The room froze. Lena's face drained of color. Cole's smile finally cracked. Mason's mouth fell open. Detective Cross's gaze snapped to Lena. Mrs. Caldwell. Is that true? Her hands tightened around her purse like it was glued to her palms. It was sugar. That's all. Give me the packet. She hesitated. Cole's voice slid in smooth. Detective, surely this is harassment of a grieving wife. Now, Cross barked. Lena's hand trembled as she reached into her purse. Slowly, she pulled out the folded white packet. Cross took it with gloved fingers, dropped it into an evidence bag and sealed it tight. His eyes flicked to Ruth, then back to Lena. This goes to the lab. If it's sugar, you'll have nothing to fear. If it's not, his voice trailed off, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Lena broke. Tears streaked down her face, but they didn't look like grief anymore. They looked like panic. A sudden cough split the silence. All heads turned to the bed. Ethan Caldwell's eyes were open, glassy, weak but aware. His lips trembled, and this time his voice, though cracked, carried enough to be heard. Key, he rasped. Detective Cross leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, can you tell us, what key? Ethan's trembling hand lifted weakly toward the nightstand. His finger brushed the drawer handle. Paige rushed to open it. Inside was a small black leather pouch. Cross unzipped it carefully. Inside lay a single brass key, old and heavy, with the number 47 etched on its head. What does it open? Cross asked softly. Ethan's lips moved again. Locker, he croaked. Bank, records. His chest hitched and he sank back into the pillow, eyes closing. The monitor beeped steady but fragile. The room buzzed with tension. A locker. Bank records. Evidence. And Ruth knew at that moment, the key might expose everything. Detective Cross slipped the brass key into an evidence bag. His eyes swept the room hard and sharp. We're done playing polite, he said. Someone in this room tried to kill Ethan Caldwell. And this key, he held up the bag, might tell us why. Lena let out a strangled sob. Cole's face froze into a mask of calm so perfect it looked inhuman. Mason buried his face in his hands. And Ruth? Ruth felt her knees weaken, because she knew the danger had just shifted. It wasn't about poison tea anymore. It was about what that locker held, and how far the guilty would go to keep it closed. And as the sun climbed higher, Ruth noticed something chilling. Cole's eyes weren't on the key. They were on her. The woman with the mop. The one who had dared to speak. The hospital was supposed to be a place of healing, but Suite 19 had turned into a battlefield. Machines hummed steadily at Ethan Caldwell's bedside, but every heart in the room knew he was not safe. His chest rose and fell under the medicine that bound poison, his body fragile like a porcelain vase balanced on a shelf too high. The brass key in the evidence bag gleamed under the fluorescent light, tiny and ordinary, yet heavy enough to shift the air. Detective Raymond Cross held it in his gloved hand, his jaw set. He had been in dozens of crime scenes, had watched men and women fall to greed and anger, but even he felt the weight of this one. A billionaire brought low not by disease, not by chance, but by a hand close enough to share his bed or his business table. Ruth Miller stood by her cart, mop handle trembling against her palm. She had spoken finally. She had told them what she saw. The packet. The smell. The handoff between Cole Avery and Lena Caldwell. She had broken the silence that had chained her for years in this hospital, cleaning floors while men in white coats and tailored suits brushed past her as if she were invisible. But speaking had made her visible, and visibility in this room felt dangerous. Cole's eyes never left her. He wore his calm like a mask, lips curled faintly, hands folded like a man at prayer. Lena wept softly into her tissue, her pearl earrings catching the morning light, but there was no purity in her tears. Mason Lee sat crumpled on a chair, shoulders bent, his chef's jacket wrinkled and stained with sweat. The guilt around him was thick enough to choke, but it was a guilt of weakness, not of planning. Cross slid the evidence bag into his coat. Mr. Caldwell identified this key. Said it opens a locker with records. If he is correct, those records may answer who wanted him dead. His gaze swept across the room. Until we confirm, none of you leaves. Security will escort each of you separately when we search your belongings. Cole rose smoothly from his chair, his smile polite but stretched too thin. Detective, you make it sound like a drama. Ethan is gravely ill. We should focus on him, not on wild accusations from a janitor who thinks she smells metals in a cup of tea. He let the words drip, condescending and deliberate. Surely the doctors are capable of solving this without conspiracy theories. The room stilled. Ruth's stomach twisted. She wanted to shrink, to disappear back into the shadows where no one judged her. But then Ethan stirred again, his cracked lips parting. His voice, a whisper of sand, slipped through the air. Not theory. His eyes rolled toward Cole, weak but sharp, like a knife dulled at the edge but still cutting where it mattered. His fingers lifted and trembled, pointing not at his wife, not at the chef, but at his partner. His breath caught. His lips shaped one word, a word that rattled like a bell struck in the night. Cole. Lena gasped. Mason's head snapped up. Paige froze, her chart in hand. Dr. Desai's eyes narrowed. Cross stepped closer to the bed. Mr. Caldwell, are you saying Cole Avery poisoned you? The monitor beeped faster, catching the rise in Ethan's heart. He tried to speak again, but his throat seized and the sound died into a cough. His eyes fluttered closed. His body sank back into the bed. Silence fell heavy and sharp. Cole laughed. It was quiet, but it carried. The man is delirious, he said. Half-conscious, drugged, poisoned, as you say. He mutters names and we are to hang him for it? Ridiculous. He straightened his tie and smoothed his jacket. Detective, I will not sit here and let business rivals and jealous wives use a dying man's ramblings against me. Cross's eyes didn't blink. You'll sit exactly where you are until I say otherwise. He motioned to the guards. They stepped closer. Cole's smile faltered just for a breath, then returned. He sat, his posture sharp as a blade. The day dragged. Toxicology confirmed the packet Lena surrendered contained thallium. The immune drops bottle tested positive for arsenic traces. The thermos showed both. Ruth listened to every word from her quiet place in the hall. Her mop moved across tiles that didn't need cleaning. Her ears caught the details, her mind weaving them together. A pattern of poisoning too precise to be accident, too cruel to be coincidence. By afternoon, Cross made his decision. We take the key to the bank. If records exist, they'll tell us motive. Ruth, you're with me. She blinked, startled. Me? You saw more than anyone else. You noticed what the rest missed. You come. Cole's smile turned brittle. Detective, surely the help has no place in an investigation. Cross shot him a glare that could cut steel. The help kept your friend alive when 20 doctors couldn't. She comes. Ruth's chest burned with something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Fear. A strange mixture that made her spine straighten. She nodded once. The drive to the bank was a blur. Security escorted Cole, Lena, and Mason in separate cars. Ruth sat in the back of Cross's vehicle, the city rushing past the window in gray and steel. Her hands stayed clenched in her lap, but her eyes stayed sharp. She had stepped far beyond her mop and bucket now. She was in the heart of something vast. At the bank, Cross presented the warrant. The clerk led them to the lockers, rows of steel doors stretching like a vault of secrets. The key slid into number 47. The lock turned with a click. Cross opened the box and pulled out a stack of files, thick manila folders bound with rubber bands. Inside were ledgers, contracts, bank transfers. Money moved through shell companies, hidden accounts, offshore havens. At first glance, it looked like the typical wealth games of billionaires. But Ruth saw the patterns even as Cross flipped through the pages. Transfers from Ethan's accounts to Cole's companies, siphoned in small amounts that added to millions. Signatures forged. Deals rerouted. And at the bottom of the pile, a fresh document. A will. Cross laid it flat on the table. Ethan Caldwell's name was signed at the bottom, but the ink was shaky, uneven, wrong. The will declared that if Ethan died, his entire estate would transfer not to his wife, not to his family, but to his longtime partner and trusted confidant, Cole Avery. Lena let out a strangled cry. That's not possible. He wouldn't cut me out. Cole's smile bloomed like a dark flower. He knew who was loyal. He knew who could keep his empire alive. Clearly he chose me. Cross tapped the page. Clearly you forged it. Clearly you had motive. Cole's calm cracked. His voice sharpened. Careful, detective. Ruth stepped closer, her heart pounding. He poisoned him so the will would hold, she said softly, but the words carried. The tea. The drops. The packets. He was killing him slow so no one would notice until it was too late. But Ethan noticed. He tried to warn us with the key. The room buzzed with silence. Mason sobbed into his hands. Lena's tears turned to fury, her face contorted with betrayal. Cross snapped his fingers. The guards moved. Cole stood fast, his hands lifted, but his eyes burned. You think you've won because of a maid's nose and a dying man's mumble? You don't know the game you've stepped into. Cross's voice was iron. We'll let the courts decide. But for now, Cole Avery, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. They cuffed him. For the first time, the smile vanished. He glared at Ruth as they led him out. Not a word, just a stare that promised storms. Back at the hospital, Ethan was stable enough to breathe without the mask. His eyes opened when Ruth entered quietly. She stood by the bed, her uniform wrinkled, her shoes squeaking faintly. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. He raised his hand, weak and trembling, and clasped hers. His lips moved. She leaned close, tears stung her eyes. No doctor had said it. No nurse had said it. But the man who owned towers and tech empires, who had been left to die under 20 specialists' care, said it to her, the woman with the mop who had noticed the smell. Ruth smiled faintly, squeezing his hand. Just doing my job, she whispered back, though she knew it was more than that. By evening, reporters flooded the hospital entrance. Headlines blared, Billionaire poisoned by partner, Housekeeper saves Caldwell's life, Key unlocks fraud scheme. Ruth's name was not in the papers. She preferred it that way. She returned to her cart, her rag, her mop, moving silently through the corridors as always. But inside she carried something new. The knowledge that even in a world where money buys silence and power bends truth, sometimes the person nobody notices can change everything. And though Sweet 19 finally quieted, though Cole Avery sat behind bars, Ruth knew one thing for certain. The world would never look at her the same again. Because the invisible woman had spoken. And the world had listened. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for staying through every twist. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to support our growth. And as always, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from?